Hi, my name is Karen Fabian and I'm the founder of Bare Bones Yoga, and I'm really excited to do a video for you today that combines a couple of different lessons. One is based on an article I recently read in the most recent yoga journal, which I'm going to give huge props to because it's really interesting and helpful. And that lesson is going to lead me into a conversation about shoulder anatomy. And then I'm going to end the video with an opportunity for you to come to a 5-hour workshop that I'm hosting here in Boston, where I live, all about shoulder anatomy. So if you watch this and you're just feeling like this is really helpful information to you to really expand your knowledge as a yoga teacher, as a yoga practitioner, but most definitely if you're teaching yoga, it is super important that you understand the anatomy of the shoulders, because so much of what we do in yoga is dependent on shoulder strength. So let me just first start out. I'm just going to grab the article here, and I want to give a shout out to the authors of this article in the most recent yoga journal. So here we are in May. It is the May 2018 issue, and the article is by Robin Capobianco and Jana Montgomery, and they both have their PhDs, and they did an article to test the theory of can you safely jump back to plank. And they didn't just kind of do it on their teaching acumen or their experiences as teachers. They actually went into the biomechanics lab and put sensors on the body and looked for different force reactions to moving into plank versus moving into low push-up. And they looked at different things like pressure on the wrists and the shoulders, the lower back. And I won't go into all of what they came up with, and I'll highly encourage you to read it in the most recent yoga journal. But I will talk a little bit about, in this next piece of the video here, about how this relates to, how their lessons relate to the anatomy of the shoulder. So one of the things that they talk about is that when you jump back to low push-up versus plank, they talk about the the muscles around your wrists, elbows, and shoulders having to produce more torque, T-O-R-Q-U-E, which is a rotational force. And so what they're talking about here is when we move into, and I'll just kind of do it here first and then talk about it, when we move into this action, so if we were to reach the arms up and then bow down, and then from here, if we were to jump back to low push-up, and then take our up dog and our down dog, what you can't really see, but what I know is happening because I'm intentionally making the movement, is I'm rotating slightly outward with my shoulders and my elbows, and my wrists even a little bit. So this leads me to conversation about the anatomy of the shoulder. So when I'm taking that outward movement, so this is really when we start to talk about the anatomical action of external rotation, I'm calling on two specific muscles which turn out the shoulders or externally rotate the shoulders. And there's two of them. One is called the infraspinatus, and that sits back here on the scapula, attaches to the humerus. And the other one is the teres minor, and that also runs in pretty much the same direction. It's just a lot smaller muscle. The infraspinatus is a more broad-shaped muscle. And those two muscles are responsible for turning the shoulders out, or what we call external rotation. And what they're referring to in their article here, I believe, is that we do need to have a little bit of external rotation when we, even if we were to just jump back to plank, so even if we were to just kind of take that action. But it requires a little more turnout when we jump back to low push-up. And why is that? Well, my belief is that we want to prevent hunching or internal rotation, which that internal rotation movement is the job of the subscapularis, which sits on the inside of the shoulder blade itself. So that muscle is going to turn your shoulders in. Another muscle that does that is the teres major, which sits on the back of the body. So we wouldn't necessarily, can't really imagine a a time when we want to come into plank or low push-up and hunch, so something like this, right? So we want to get a little of that external rotation happening. And it's a little bit easier for people to get that in a steady pose like plank versus in something here where their arms are bent and they need to kind of maintain power and strength through the entire body to prevent the arms from kind of taking the brunt of it. So one of the things that we can do as we're teaching is bring cues into teaching that help students externally rotate a little bit in the shoulders. So again, start to turn on those muscles back here that are responsible for external rotation, teres minor and infraspinatus, rather than rather than turning on their subscapularis, which we're so used to doing all day because we hunch and the shoulders are internally rotated. So you can start to see how any pose where the palms are down is going to tempt us to turn the shoulders in. It's only going to get exacerbated if we're turning in the shoulders or if we're asked to have our palms facing the ground in a dynamic movement. And when we're moving from, when we're jumping back to low push-up, that's a very dynamic movement versus something that's a little more streamlined, like jumping back to plank. You can kind of think of it like a progressive exercise where you're kind of building from one point to another and adding on a little more complexity. So what they talk about in the article, and just to kind of think about here as we're having this conversation, is that if we just jump back to plank, we still need a little external rotation. If we jump back to low push-up, we need even a little bit more. And for most teachers, well, I wouldn't say for most teachers, but if the teacher is unaware of the actions of these muscles, if they're unaware of how to cue in such a way that prevents people from going to kind of where they always are, they're going to miss out on opportunities to start to broaden through the front of the chest, right? And even then, there are some times that we may cue in this way, right? So teachers may know, oh, well, I want to kind of keep the chest broad, but without knowing why. Why is that important? And this is really one of the things that I really find so critical, to not just understanding shape and alignment, which is alignment would be just keep the shoulders broad, but understand the anatomy. When we keep the shoulders broad, when we open the front of the chest, what's happening under the skin? What's happening from an anatomical perspective? Because I guarantee you as a teacher, if you get that, even just to this degree, I'm not even saying at this point, let's break down the teres minor and the infraspinatus in terms of origin and insertion. I'm just saying, let's say at the level, kind of the gross anatomy level, of just knowing what those muscles are and where they are, generally, without having to get into the fine-tuned detail of origin and insertion in a very detailed way. If we know that, then we can really truly teach the shape and also bring cues in that can prevent some of the things that are going to be challenges. If we just know the shape and we don't know the muscles and we don't really know, well, why does it make sense to keep the chest broad? Then we're really missing out on really important information we can share with our students to not only help them on the mat, but help them in their life from a postural level, from the perspective of moving around all day. As they come to the mat, of course, there's a lot of shapes where we have the palms down and we want them to start to kind of activate those muscles versus depending on the ones that they always do, the subscapularis and the teres major, that's kind of the hunching muscles of the shoulder. So again, quick lesson here, but I think it really kind of scratches the surface to a certain extent in regards to the anatomy of the shoulder and the importance of understanding that, especially for yoga teachers when we want to teach effectively and have an impact that's more broad on our students than just the impact we make in class. So a couple things in closing. I definitely would refer you to that science-based article, Love Science, which is in the May Yoga Journal. That's number one. Number two, I would also direct you to my website, barebonesyoga.com. On the events page, you'll see the link to my May 19th Boston 5-hour workshop. There'll be CEUs for yoga teachers, discounts on my books, my online courses. If you sign up by May 4th, You'll get my 200-page anatomy manual, which is normally $65. You'll get that for free. Also on my website on the home page, I encourage you to take my Learn Yoga Challenge, which is a free video series, which is here on my YouTube. But if you click to it on the home page, you'll download the guide to the Learn Yoga Challenge, and then you'll access from the link on the download all the videos here on my YouTube channel, which will walk you through the poses, the alignment, and some of the anatomy. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for future videos, please send me an email. Thank you so much, and namaste.